Hello, hello, everybody. My name is Vivian Kaloxilos. I have been working in the regenerative soil applied field ecology domain in agriculture for 13 years. Some of you may have already heard of me as a veteran student and ex-teacher of soil food web, where I was the first Canadian student to go through all of Elaine's complete training as a consultant. Um, and I mentored her consultants in training across the world, including Brian Weig and Joe Tobias and many other lovely, lovely people. Some of you may have heard of me as the organizer of the first Living Soil Symposium in Montreal, a big event in 2017 that, at least in our local scene here in Quebec, blasted the word of soil regeneration and soil life, the living ecosystem that needs to be paid attention to as the missing link in agriculture. So I've been pretty involved in this for over a decade now. And Matt asked me if I wanted to come and speak in this first regenerative soil conference by Matt Powers online. And it's been a while that I've been shying away from doing these kind of things. I tend have to been sticking to Canadian events. But after my third cease and desist from the Quebecois Order of Agronomists claiming expertise, exclusive expertise over soil regeneration. I am opening myself back up to the world and have been working with some of the most, I'd say, elders people we have, elder figures in this global community, the pioneers of doing the work, not just the science, but getting the results in the field, such as Todd Harrington and Ray Archuleta. So when he asked me if I want to share some stuff, I decided to say yes. And he asked me to talk about how I got started in this path, um, and maybe some projects I've worked on, but I'd also like to take the opportunity as a soil ecologist who has been working in this field for so long to bring some clarity as to what is possible and what is not possible and what we have to be careful of. Maybe just dispel some myths officially. In my humble opinion, and just only, merely over a decade of experience in this field, but I'd just like to share a couple of things that I have noticed. So, and I will share some case studies of some great successes of regenerative agriculture on a large scale. And I mean, really mind-blowingly different creative approaches to farming. And because I also know that some people think this is not possible on a large scale. And my friends, I'm here to tell you that we're still working out the kinks, but it is possible. Um, so a little bit about me, I'll just jump right in. Like I said, my name is Vivian Kaloxilos. I am based in Quebec, Canada. And how I started this path. Well, I'm a daughter of a naturopath, and I've always witnessed my mother kind of and how she looks at a human being when there's something wrong with them, and just the holistic way in which she approaches the human ecosystem, and that always really inspired me. And I definitely bring that approach into my work as a applied soil ecologist. Um, but I went to the School of Environment at McGill University, which is a one-way ticket to manic depression because uh, I mean, maybe it's different today, but when I was there, my experience was, um, you learn a lot about Earth systems, but you're basically only learning about problems and you're not learning about any solutions. And I had so much fear instilled in me, and I no longer do. Actually, I have only positivity inside of me when I think of what's possible for our future on planet Earth in terms of our ability to restore resilience and diverse, functioning, clean, abundant ecosystems. Um, but that's kind of where I started. And so I refused to believe that there were no solutions. And so I went on a quest to find solutions. And in my one of my courses was an ecological anthropology course. I was doing research and I happened to find this article, or a friend of mine shared this article with me about Montreal pre-colonialism and how the article was called Montreal or Hochelaga, the people of the trees, something like that. And how Montreal essentially was a giant food forest and network of streams and the idea of a food forest just blew my mind, and the way that they were, because we were taught that they were just lightly walking over the ground and weren't interfering and weren't disturbing, but that is so not true. They were heavily managing ecosystems for incredible abundance and resilience. Um, and that just blew my mind. That led me down the permaculture rabbit hole, where I was like, when people come to Jesus and they're called born again Christians, well, I'm also a born again permaculturalist. I was born again. Any fears or anxieties that I had just melted away because as one of the founders of the permaculture movement, Bill Mollison said, um, as the world's problems get increasingly more complex, the solutions become embarrassingly simple. And I have found that to be true. Um, so after that, I finished my degree in Panama at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute with McGill. Um, and basically, it was a whole semester of applied field ecology where we were put into all kinds of situations where we had to develop the methods to measure whatever it was they wanted us to measure. So it was developing methods for applied field ecology, which is still very, very useful for me today. And I graduated, came back to Quebec. I thought I wanted to become a market gardener and plant a food forest. So I was looking for land, and there was this group of guys who had bought this 60-acre piece of land that had been for 40 years monoculture corn and soy rotations. And it was complete desertified pottery clay that would flash flood and then have no water at all for the rest of the year. And the ecosystem was mosquitoes. Um, just mosquitoes. I kid you not. So these guys were looking for someone who could help them revive that piece of earth. And um, through the network and grapevine, they got a hold of me. I was looking for land. They were looking for somebody like me. So that was great. And I got to um, just intuitively, with some other people over there, regenerate this piece of farmland. And my skills in what I had learned in permaculture and what I had learned as an applied field ecologist started coming in handy, but there was a lot of things to discover. And we were doing it and we watched that ecosystem. We dropped organic matter, we planted a lot of different plants, we let the weeds grow, which is a very important thing as well. If you can do it, of course, this is a remediation phase if you're actively farming. well, we'll get to that later, actually. I've got a good case study for this, but with the data. We created niches and habitats for specific predators we wanted to attract. We created water landscapes and ponds and dropped biology. And, through this process, we watched the ecosystem bounce back to life where it was just mosquitoes and then the grasshoppers, and then certain birds, and then the frogs that were in the ponds, which were very useful. And the bats started showing up, and then the wasps, and then the bees, and the butterflies, and then praying mantis, and on and on and on and on. And we saw this just in a 4-year time frame. So very, very encouraging. And in 2013, there was a permaculture convergence in Quebec, Northeastern Permaculture Convergence. And this is where I met Elaine. And this is where she brought me under her wing and taught me the science behind basically what I was doing. She taught me the science, she taught me the microscope, all the ins and outs of the soil biology. And it just blew my mind. And that's why I ended up working I ended up working with her and training her consultants. Um, and in 2015, I founded Docteur. And Docteur is a French pun because that's how cool I am. Doctor in French is docteur, and earth or soil in French is terre. So I'm the earth doctor, docteur. There we go. Just got to get that out of the way. So, and so ever since, I have been fortunate to witness. Um, I've been looking at soils and composts under the microscope ever since then. I've been doing whole ecosystem assessments ever since then. And all of the kind of crazy farmers who were seen as crazy, the ones that were doing differently, they kind of were cast aside by their communities as as being loco for going off the conventional path. Those are the kinds of people that have been calling me for just over a decade. And I've been, helping them not just increase biodiversity, but to do so consciously, to understand all the different parts and then how they interact together. Because I'm an ecologist, so and to help them understand the association between microbes and plant health, metabolism, and photosynthesis, and predator-prey interactions, and so that they can come up with their own plan in their own rate process to regenerate their ecosystem, soil ecosystems on their farms. And I was just the person that was there to help bring clarity and consciousness into what they're doing. It's not just putting 18 species out, but they all serve the same function in the ecosystem. No, you're better off to put seven, you're better off to put seven plants out that come from seven different taxonomical families because their microbiomes will work together and communicate and exchange kind of things, and basically validate them in their ideas that everyone else was saying were crazy. um, and so I've been able to objectively follow what works, what doesn't work over the years. And now I'm really lucky because I get to work with Todd Harrington and take this to a whole new level and a whole new scale of agriculture. How do you transition? How do we transition farms that are super heavy inputs responsibly, as in without causing crop failures? So these are all the things, and I'm gonna I want to talk about some of the things I've noticed and share some of the case studies I've worked on. And please do excuse me while I periodically sip on my tea during this talk. So first, soil, what is regenerative agriculture? Because there is no consensus definition of what it means to regenerate. And why are we even talking about regeneration? So we had conventional agriculture, which, as we now know very well, has degenerated ecosystems. It has declined. Those ecosystems have low microbial life. The percentage of organic matter has gone down and down and down. The nutrient resources have gone down and down and down. The fertility has gone down and down and down. Therefore, the crops, you need to put in way more in order to get a yield, and the nutrition and the resilience, all of that have gone down and down and down. So then the global community was like, okay, well, we can't do this anymore. We need to go to sustainable agriculture. And we start seeing organic agriculture come in the scene. But organic agriculture, while it's not poison, there's no poisons involved, it is still, in my opinion, not regenerative. I've seen lots of organic farms that have very, very poor report cards on how their different ecosystem services and functions have collapsed. So, so that's one thing, and it wasn't enough to just sustain a state of degradation. We need to replenish the the percentage of organic matter. We need to replenish the resources and the nutrients and the water and the life in these soils in order for it to be beyond sustainable. We can't just sustain a state of degradation. So this is why we're talking about regenerative agriculture. I'm not offering a complete definition, but at least I'm proposing that a part of it should be that regenerative agriculture is an agriculture that builds richness and life and resilience over time. And you can't do that without the soil food web. You can't do that without the soil organisms. It is, if you understand all the different parts of an ecosystem, what they do individually, and then how they all work together, you understand that the role of decomposition, which we need decomposition in order for humification to happen, in order to build organic matter in the soil, you cannot do this without fungal life in the soil. You cannot increase the mineral content of the soil without fungal life and bacterial life. And in order to have these resources cycling, which is another part of my proposed definition, is that we're building these resources over time, richness and life over time, and that these resources are cycling. They're building and they're cycling. And in order for them to cycle around, you need the predators, the amoeba, the flagellates, the nematodes, in order to release those nutrients so that the plants can take them up. And if this is your first time you've ever heard about soil ecology, I apologize because everything I just said probably sounds like Chinese to you. But maybe you can join me or somebody else in an intro course to what is living soil to really dive in deeper here. So that's why living soils, what I call living soils, are front and center, or should be front and center in the regenerative movement. we can only get so far. And I've seen even in permaculture systems where we're applying all these agroecological principles, um, that without the soil biology, things don't cycle. It takes a very, very, very long time. But what people also are getting wrong, and I really want to make this clear, is that while soil biology and the whole soil microbiome is so key for regenerative agriculture, just as it is for human health, if you are trying to transition your farm or someone else's farm and you just take out the inputs and you take out all the inputs and you are only putting compost extract or compost tea, every time I have seen that, I've never done it, but every time I've seen it, uh, it just leads to immense crop failures. Unless those systems have already taken out all the inputs, then the biology just itself will absolutely help bring up the yields. But if you're transitioning from a high input agriculture and you just take that out and you put soil biology, it's going to cause problems. So I want to make that clear because there are many people who talk about soil biology, and yes, it is key, it is central, it is the missing link, absolutely. But it is not the magic bullet. Um, The reality is, if you've ever been sick and on a real healing journey in a holistic medicine way, there is no there is no one solution to transitioning your body and your health into a state of equilibrium. It's a synergistic, orchestrated combination of things, well understood, well combined together in a very precise way. And healing soil ecosystems and farm ecosystems is the same thing. So I want to make that clear as a veteran of the soil food web community that um, yes, the microbes are so important and we need good compost and we need the microbes in the soil. And look at my Zoom camera just giving the thumbs up. Yes, we do, but that's not all it takes, especially if you're dealing with high inputs. Um, so I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to talk about some of the biggest challenges I've seen in regenerative agriculture, is exactly that is, we see right now governments around the world installing laws, that punish farmers for nitrogen inputs for the sake of the environment. And while, yes, in theory, we absolutely do need to get rid of nitrogen inputs, in order to um, regenerate soil ecosystems and to protect our environment, we can't just do it overnight. Like, we can't put that kind of pressure on farmers. It's not fair. There is a process. It's a transition. And there's a very delicate art and science, in order to do that, because the natural nitrogen cycle of the soil takes time to regenerate. That nitrogen cycle, nature's nitrogen cycle, has everything to do with the soil food web and mycorrhiza and the saprophytic fungi and the predator-prey interactions. And a plant's ability to make those associations, to build the relationships and feed a growing population of microbes around its root system. And when we use these kind of inputs, we interrupt that communication. So yes, it needs to happen, but it needs to be, uh, th there's a process. We can't just rip it out. I've seen a couple of places who, before I got there, they were using, let's say in an orchard, they were conventionally growing apples, and they cold turkey took everything out. And I think they had no yield for 4 years or something. It was such a shock. So if you're coming in at that point and you're bringing in soil biology and you're bringing in mineral sprays and you're bringing in plant ferments and you're working on, the diversifying the ecosystem, I mean, you got nothing to lose. The person already did it. Um, but yeah, you got to be careful with transitioning because that natural nitrogen cycle of the soil food web building back up, um, which takes a diversity of plants bringing in a diversity of exudates, plant juices through photosynthesis in order to do that, um, yeah, you're going to have problems. So I think I want to show you a case study that talks really well about all of this, what I'm saying here. So yeah, the apples, I want to just show you one fall. I think it was fall of 2021 or 2022. I'm going to share my screen. Um, Bear with me, please. Okie dokie. And slideshow. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I want to just show you this. This is in French. Apologies. Like I said, this is a very impromptu talk. It's very last minute. I didn't even know last night if I was gonna be able to do this with you guys. Um, so this was a lady who has it's very small, a 3-acre orchard. This isn't the same one as the other orchard I was just talking about. That was a 25-acre orchard. But this lady, she called me in November 2021, because this is the year after. Um, in a total panic, she said she had fire blight so bad in her orchard that all of her people consulting her, the agronomists, and just parentheses, I'm not anti-agronomists. There are many great agronomists, but this group of agronomists was had consulted her to finally just cut down all of her mature orchard because it had been years and years and years. They were trying to control this fire blight and they were topping off whole limbs of trees. I unfortunately couldn't find my before photos. They're on a phone that has died on me, and I have to figure out how to get them off the phone. Um, so I show up and I'd never seen anything so bad. The fire blight was literally everywhere, and some trees, mature trees, were just reduced down to one branch because they'd been amputating everything. And I said, look, before you chop everything down, let's just try an extract. At this point, they were organic. They weren't putting many inputs anymore. They were just trying to they were putting, I guess, sulfur and other things in order to control the bacterial blight, the fire blight. So I just said, hey, look, why don't we just try a compost extract? And if it doesn't work, cut your trees down after. So with our compost that we made, we make and sell compost now because our farmers asked us to. And we're really good at it. So we brought our compost, we made a brew, we sprayed it for them in, I think it was November. There was snow on the ground at this point to show them how it was done. But there's a part of the life cycle when you're dealing with any disease or any pest, you need to observe the whole life cycle and each different moment of the year in which it gets into the plant and causes problems. And you need to have a plan for each one of those moments of the life cycle. One of them is in the fall. So we did a treatment in the fall, and in the spring, she bought our compost. We set her up with an extraction system, and away she went. And then I never heard from her for months. And so I assumed that it didn't work and she had cut down her trees. But then in August, 2022, I get a call from this lady who's an agriculture technician, and she's blasting me. She in my ear in the phone. You cannot claim that compost extract cures fire blight, blah, 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 that's irresponsible. And I'm like, whoa, 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 what are you talking about? I didn't claim anything. What are you talking about? And it turns out that this woman on the phone who was yelling at me is the sister of the lady who asked me to come help her with her trees. So she said, well, yeah, my sister called you and she's been using your extract and she's been using it all summer and she has no more fire blight. And I go, what? She goes, yeah, it's gone. I'm like, really? Because I didn't know if that was going to work. And so I call the lady, and all three of us we meet up and we go look at the trees, and the fire blight is gone. And I also not just extract, but I told her, she needed to put proper canopy mulching around, and she needed to start creating little islands of biodiversity within her orchard and letting the grass grow longer several times a year, different things in order for mycorrhizal colonization to increase and to all kinds of other stuff. And there was no more fire blight. And on a lot of the branches the trunks where the fire blight was, you all of a sudden there was all of this lichen growing in all of the scars, and they were occupying that space, and that is a really good sign. There was no lichen um, the year before, but a year later there was lichen everywhere, and lichen is not a bad thing. They're not taking any nutrients from the trees. They're using the tree as a surface to do photosynthesis, to capture sunlight. They're autotrophs. Um, some lichen will grab minerals from rocks and stuff, but overall, it's a very good sign of a healthy ecosystem. And she, to this day, she buys like 100 liters of our compost a year and does extracts, I think, every week or every other week. And in this case, the biology made all the difference. But they weren't using high inputs or anything. And this, to my surprise, made all the difference for them. So, whoops, we're not going to go to this one. I just wanted to talk about that. But I wanted to show this other case study of a 2,000-acre cereal, corn, and soy farm who in 2014 um, went organic, and he pulled out of nowhere, just cold turkey, all of his nitrogen inputs. And he experienced ever, ever declining yields. And this is because in a system where you've been interrupting plant microbe associations for so many years using these inputs, all of a sudden taking them out, well, now the system doesn't really have a source because it takes time for that nitrogen cycle to come back. And there can be so many variables that determine that lag time. What's your percentage organic matter? What's the salinity of your soil? Do you have toxicity? Um, are you doing cover crops, diverse cover cropping? Are you monoculture? Are you tilling? So many things will determine what that lag time is. But so let me just, and apologies again, this slideshow is in French, but I will present it to you in English here. So this is Ferme Grossifis. His name is Jean-François, the farmer. Whoops. Hello, everybody. Everybody's seeing my emails. Don't share. Um, so he's in Quebec. He's 2,000 acres, and he's been doing trials in organic regenerative since 2014. And the reason why we say organic regenerative is because there are other farmers here who are doing what they call regenerative agriculture, but they're still using herbicides and stuff because they're having problems controlling the weeds. And so these are the two big challenges I've seen in in transitioning to regenerative agriculture is one, this nitrogen component. It's the nitrogen conundrum where we need to stop putting these inputs on the ground where they interrupt these associations and these relationship building between plants and microbes. But we can't just take out nitrogen cold turkey from systems. And this is where amino acid sprays come in and foliar sprays come in of certain things. And this is where I'm saying that if you're just putting soil biology in a lot of scenarios, it is really not enough. And even foliar sprays, we need to be building full ecosystems. Um, and we need to be bringing awareness and making actions consciously, understanding all the different parts and how they play together so that you can synergistically orchestrate a regenerative process. So this is Jean-Francois, and I'm just going to put another 10 minutes on my timer here so I don't talk for too long. And we did this day with EcoCert Canada this year because when Jean-Francois came to me in 2019, he was basically a man on his knees. He had less than a ton per hectare of harvest for all of his different crops, whether it was spelt, whether it was any kind of cereal grain, soya, and the break-even point is 1 ton a hectare. So it was a really bad situation. He saw me at the Living Soil Symposium, and finally he called me a few years later, and I got there and started looking at his soils. I asked him, what he was doing, and he said he was putting 120 units of liquid urea and had stopped that cold turkey in 2014. And he was doing multi-species cover crops since 2014, and even before that, and he had not tilled his land in 19 years. So he was doing all these agroecological principles, but still his yield was declining year after year. And this is the nitrogen cycle lag. I also, his soils were rich in organic matter. They had 4 to 8%. They had pH of 6.7 to 7.4. So everything, good drainage. He was applying agroecological principles. He hadn't tilled his land in 19 years, but he still was not getting good yields at all, and his soil was drying up all the time. So I'm just going to skip through some of these slides here. So this is his soy, 350 kilos a hectare. Wheat is blé, 2 tons, not much. Épeautre is barley, 2 tons a hectare, and seigle is rye, 1.5 tons. So not very good. In 2020, I come and look at his soils with an agronomist with me supervising me, because that's the way it has to be in Quebec. And we stuck in, and right away we could smell something, and it smelled like industry. And I go like, why does your soil smell like tires? And he goes, well, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that for many years I was told to put 30 to 40 tons a hectare of paper mill sludge. He did that for 15 years on his soils. And he was told to do that in order to, and like prescribed that in order to increase his organic matter in his soils. But those paper mill sludges are full of junk. And that just shocked the soils, one, shocked the biology, shocked the soils because of all the junk in that stuff. And two, caused the thirst of nitrogen to be even worse because of all of this heavy carbon material that he was putting in. And we looked under his soils under the microscope on the farm. And of course, we saw, it was devoid of fungal life. It was devoid of predators. And so this is what I mean by living soils and soil ecology and thriving. So there's an amoeba back here. This is what we call a nematode. Oh, there's a flagellate. There's like a soil hog flagellate spinning around in the background. The amoeba, which are like the soil cows. These are all beneficial predators. We need them to release nutrients that the bacteria and fungi tie up in their bodies to the plants. That's the only way a plant can consume the food. Here's a nice fungal hypha right here. But this is what we mean by living soils. And most agricultural soils look like this. And this is basically what Jean-Francois had. And he goes, but yeah, but our nutrients were, sorry, I'm just skipping through. Our nutrients were all there. The chemistry tests are fine. The pH is like, so it should be fertile. Well, it's like, hold on a second. And this is another thing I've gotten in trouble for, is saying this is nutrients and minerals don't have a sex drive. They don't have reproductive organs. So for me, when I think about fertility, I think about the ability of a living organism to reproduce. So how is it? And this is part of the problem of why we have degenerated our ecosystems, is that fertility has been seen as a measure of NPK, et cetera, how much you have in your soil. But I'm sorry, they are not reproductive beings. If we want to talk about fertility, we need to be talking about soil life. So we provided him with compost and a GOT extractor, and we were like, your soils are in intensive care. Here's how you do it. And in autumn 2020, we did a test on 10 hectares. He has a test plot. Every farmer that wants to be doing regenerative agriculture, if you can, devote a certain percentage of your farm to as test plots. It's a really good idea. So Jean-Francois had these test plots, and he had just his oat cover crop mix in there, and we did 4 times. He did 4 times 250 liter or 6 gallon application per hectare of compost extract over 1 month. And so this is the 10 hectare side of with the extract. This is the 10 hectare side without the extract. And you can see right along the border here the stark difference, and not just the height and the color and the girth of the oats, but the presence of dandelions is significantly different. That and this is the claim that Soil Food Web is making that I agree with, is that as you shift your fungal bacterial ratio, you are shifting your weeds. It's not that you won't have any more weeds. It's that you'll always have undesirable plants you didn't want, if you don't fill the space. It's just the types of plants are going to shift to the kinds of plants that are reproduce less vigorously and are less annoying. So, after 1 month here, again, this is the extract side. This is the no extract side here too. I'm just going to move my face here. Extract side on the left, non-extract side on the right. He saw all he needed to see. That's the only result he's seen in a long time. So again, this is 2020. This is not the test plot. This is just the state of his yields and all the rest of the fields. So He he modified his sprayer, and the next year he sprayed with a 1,000 liter tank. And he sprayed all of his, well, this same year, he sprayed all of his cover crops and his seedlings of winter rye and stuff in the fall. And in that winter, we invested in an industrial extractor here where we can extract thousands of gallons of extract um, in a very short amount of time. So for large scale, another thing that needs to be done that this case study will demonstrate to you is in order for regenerative agriculture to be feasible on a large scale, we need equipment. The equipment that exists right now is not the equipment that we need for regenerative agriculture. Most of that equipment can be modified, but we also need just completely new things. So he invested in this. This is from Todd Harrington. This is Todd Harrington's design. You'll see similar ones. They're all based off of Todd Harrington's original work, and they work great. This is our compost. And he started spraying. I don't even know how much he sprayed. He just went nuts and sprayed all the time as best as he could. This is just the color of the extract in the extractor. Here's Jean-Francois right here. Here's the compost being filtered before it goes into the extraction unit. So this is what some of the large scale equipment looks like if you want to be doing, kind of industrial regeneration on an industrial level. This nice chocolate brown cover. And so he was out spraying all the time, and he's certified organic. And the certifying body in Canada for organic is called EcoCert. And his Jean-Francois's neighbor, who is conventional, he saw Jean-Francois spraying something all the time. And all of a sudden, his crops looked great. So his neighbor called EcoCert to complain about Jean-Francois because he was convinced that Jean-Francois was cheating with nitrogen inputs. So EcoCert shows up to investigate, only to find that he's not cheating, but he's using extracts and nettle ferments, and it's working. And this is why EcoCert works with us. And this summer we hosted an event funded by EcoCert Canada, second year in a row at Jean-Francois's farm. We had 72 farmers show up, and it was organized in 2 weeks in the middle of the growing season. That's saying something. But yeah, so he sprayed all year. He sprayed his 740 hectares or 2,000 acres 4 to 5 times at 250 liters a hectare. We had to modify his sprayer and his nozzles and his filters for all the microbes, and so that they wouldn't clog up and stuff. And here's July 2021. Look at this beautiful green. And while his heads were still standing in other organic fields, they had already were majority wilted over, and they were just fat grains. The soil looked and smelled different already. Of course, soil regeneration does not happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 2 years. It depends on what you're doing and how you're combining the synergy of things. But we're still already seeing an improvement. July of 2021, 2021, by the way, in Quebec was the worst drought on record. And his soil was way more moist than when we looked at it the year before. And here you can see, this is what we're looking at. You can see stripes of green and then stripes of, sorry, it's green and then stripes of yellow. And this is where the nozzles were clogged because we're still figuring out the equipment stuff that the extract wasn't being poured on. But this was a little hill, part of his land that just never germinated. And while it's very low compared to the rest that were very high, tall, it germinated and produced. And you can just look at the fatness and size of these grains. Here's the happy Jean-Francois right here. So here we go, 2021, the soy bumped up to at least 1.2 tons a hectare, going in the right direction. The spelt, sorry, epot is spelt. The spelt 5.5 tons a hectare. The wheat 4 tons a hectare. The rye 3 tons a hectare. Now I have to keep in mind two things. Being fair, in 2020, the yields were so bad that he just left everything in the field. So there was a lot of carbon material for things to uh, for the fungi to chew off of all winter. So that contributed to this huge bump crop, this bump in yield was I have to consider that some of that was due to a lot of that carbon left in the fields the years before. But this was the worst spring. This was the worst and longest spring drought on record was 2021, and we still got these yields. 2022, he invested a new sprayer just for extracts. And here we go. So spraying on a large scale. And 2022, he stopped sowing cover crops on portions of his land. So like I said, Jean-Francois has test plots, and this is very important for those who want to figure out regenerative agriculture. So he's got test plots where he's no longer buying seed and sowing a diverse cover crop. He just started letting permanent cover wild, whatever the soil wanted to pop up, he would let it pop up. And there was a lot of clover, a lot of peas and stuff coming up, probably from, no, he sowed peas among a wild cover crop. That was it. And it got really dense, and on 100 of his hectares out of 740 hectares, he started playing with strip till methods where he would leave a permanent wild cover crop and he'd strip till into that and then sow his crop into the strip. And he started playing around with that. So he modified a strip till in order to apply compost extract on a depth. What he was using to seed was also laying down extract. And then he has this new machine that I think was designed in France called Roll and Sam. And he had to modify another machine before he got this. But the Roll and Sam, basically what it does is, I'll show you a picture. I'm going to zoom forward, but it allows him to have a permanent cover crop and to strip till into it. He plants in the strip, and then after his crop starts to germinate, he just crimps. It's a roller crimper that's designed for this strip till method. That roller crimps on either side of the strip, not touching the crop, but just crimping down the diverse, permanent, wild cover crop, and allows his crop to take photosynthetic advantage. And he's had amazing results with this. This is in 2023. Corn and soy. He stopped growing corn until then because there was no yield. So the 2023 corn strip till, so he's not even farming on the full surface because he has a biological quarter of a wild permanent cover crop growing within each row. He produced 6 tons a hectare. And the previous years, there was no harvest. And now we're messing with corn varieties to use more heirloom corn seeds because even the organic corn has been bred to need nitrogen, in a lot of nitrogen inputs. So what we're seeing is the corn comes up And then at some point it yellows, and then we have to put manure along the strip. So he's designed a thing where he puts manure along the strip, and it keeps growing. But for next year, we're trying to get heirloom seed varieties and put that in the test plot, because I have a hunch that these genetics of the heirloom they're not bred to be pumped up on nitrogen. So I think we're going to have a different result. And in the regular spacing of soy, he'd had a bad year. But pardon me, my computer's doing its own thing. So 2020 soy, 900 kilos. 2021, we went up to, with all the extracts, we went up to 1.2 plus tons a hectare. 2022, in the strip till, 1.5 tons on 15 acres, which was more yield than the regular spacing soy in 2022, which I don't have the data here. 2023 in strip till, he had 3 tons a hectare, and he had points where he had 3.5 tons a hectare. He did this on over 5 hectares because he's still experimenting. This is just some machinery stuff and how he injects. This is the extract going out. So I'm just going to skip through because I want to, but this is what the roll and stem kind of looks like. And we're going to be putting out like a fully documented, professionally filmed with drones and all the things version of this case study where you can see everything happening in real time. We're going to put that out sometime this winter or this spring. So follow us at duckterre.ca or duckterre on Facebook. And how it just crimps everything down. This is the Roland stem. And we had a student this summer, because aphids are a huge problem in soy in this region of Quebec, where insecticides are being used through the roof in order to control, because they're causing such a mess in terms of yield. And so there's students, agronomists, ecologists that have been going around counting the aphids in all of the different soy fields in this area that Jean-François' farm is in. And they came to Jean-François and they found aphids, but like it was negligible amounts. And that they were, well, why is that happening? Well, you have biological corridors that spring back up, but they're not taller than the crop, that create a habitat for all kinds of predators, the ladybugs, the ants, and we're spraying nematodes that can, in the extracts, that can eat the larva. So no problems with that. No mold problems because of the aeration improvement. Look at this, beautiful. So this year, I'm supposed to talk with Jean-François soon to get the actual data report for this year, but he was projecting 3.5 to 4 tons a hectare in a strip till and a permanent wild cover crop on 250 hectares he did this year. And he was thinking 6 to 8 tons, 6.5 to 8 tons per hectare of corn on 100 hectares this year. That is competitive with conventional numbers. So this is just a lot of French that I'm going to skip through. So we're going to try this year. We're going to try doing all of the wheat and all of the cereals in a strip as well. We're going to try doing vegetables in the strip. We're going to try doing potatoes. And I'm trying to talk him into, I work with the Canadian Federation of forage plants and a lot of regenerative grazers. And the young men that work at Jean-François' farm are really into this idea as well, where we skip a couple of the strips and put in fencing and let animals graze. I know this sounds crazy. I know this sounds like a lot of work, and you need somebody who's not Jean-François, not the main farmer, to take up this function and responsibility. Otherwise, it's just unrealistic. But to graze the permanent cover crop in order to prevent it from getting too perennial, in order also to drop some nitrogen into the cycle, and then to rotate in and out of that. So this is another crazy idea, but Jean-François was someone everyone considered crazy. All the other farmers liked him, but they thought he was crazy. And this summer they showed up and they're seeing these results. They're not calling him crazy anymore. They they're interested in starting this process themselves. And something that's really cool is we've seen the shift in weeds or undesired plants that pop up on their own over the years. From the dandelions are disappearing, and we have trifolios showing up, and we have all the red and white clover and chickweed, not chickweed, what is it called in English? I can't remember, but we have lupins and luzerne, alfalfa showing up, and chicory, and then now we're seeing grasses showing up, more and more grasses, wild indigenous grasses or grasses that were sown by the people who farmed. This was pasture land before it was Jean-François' land. Where are these seeds coming from? They're coming from the soil. The soil is a huge seed bank. And this is kind of the soil food web claim, that as you shift your soil profile, you're going to be shifting in what kind of plants are showing up. And while the conventional farmer next to Jean-François has dandelion seeds flying in the wind everywhere, they're not showing up at Jean-François' farm because of this fungal bacterial ratio shifting and the nutrient profile shifting. And it's the soil that's selecting, and the seeds themselves that have their own intelligence that are waking up in this. This is on another project in Toronto, which was a military base that wanted to become, it was like basically a parking lot that wanted to become an urban ag. This is after 3 years with a 14 species cover crop mix. I worked with this awesome permaculturalist consultant in Ontario. And after 3 years, I told them to put down one treatment of extract in the fall with liquid seaweed every year. And I get there, and one side of the field is divided by a ditch, and one side has this beautiful humus layer. And the other side has no humus layer and just the thatch buildup. And then they let me know, they're like, yeah, well, we didn't want to go over the ditch with all our equipment, so we only sprayed this side of the field and we thought you wouldn't notice. So anywho, let's see, what else is that? So what happened at Jean-François is this my crazy nitrogen cycle. Matt Powers has a much more beautiful one than I do. I'm envious. But not only did this, we're seeing this evidence of the nitrogen cycle reboot, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a sec because that's a bunch of French that you guys probably want to understand. But he economically, I will pull that up still though. Where is it? The economics of it are he's saving $100 a hectare, not sowing seeds, just letting things come up. And then with the seed, with the seed, and I'm just going to refind my thing again because I really want to show you. Anyways, I guess I'll just try to ballpark it, but basically per hectare, it cost him $500 per hectare to produce 6 to 8 tons of corn, which is nothing. And $200 to produce soy, to produce, what was it? Like 3 to 3.5 to 4 tons of soy per hectare. So I mean, he's saving money. He's actually producing on a smaller acreage, as in he's got less plants per acre. I'm just realizing how red my face is. But he's getting higher yields. So that's some of my case studies that I wanted to share of exciting things. That regenerative agriculture is about understanding all of the parts and how they work synergistically together. It is an orchestra. That's how Jean-Francois sees it. That's how many regenerative farmers who are seeing results see it. Um, some key bottleneck points are the nitrogen cycle and the lag time it takes to regenerate that, and controlling weeds. Getting herbicides out needs new technology. There are farmers doing similar strip till tests to Jean-Francois, not with wild permanent cover crops, but with sowed cover crop. And then they're getting really invasive grasses along the strip, and then they have to use some herbicide, which I'm not going to judge them for what they got to do, but we need new equipment and new ideas in order to make regenerative agriculture work on a large scale. And Jean-Francois is just a beautiful example of how that is possible. So that's it for me today. This is a bit longer than I thought it would be, but I hope you enjoyed it. You can follow Docteur's work at docteur.ca. We have a new website coming soon-ish. We have Jean-Francois's full case study, fully documented with video and stuff coming out soon-ish. Uh, Updates from Todd Harrington and Ray Archuleta and all our work that we're going to be doing with farmers around the world. Good news, the biggest farms around the world want to regenerate. That's awesome. And we don't post very often, but if you sign up to our newsletter, anything exciting going on that we've been involved in, you'll hear about it. So, including our courses that are coming up and events and anything like that. So, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.